After you've got your rate card uploaded to the system, we'll probably want to get the routing set up and link it into the customer. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll go to Management Customer and use one of the customers we made before, my test customer. We'll click on the routing section. In here, this is where all of the calls will land. So we're going to add a new route, and I'm going to select the rate card. I'm going to use my UK mobile customer card. Now in here, we could add a tech prefix. So if we wanted our tech prefix to, for example, be 1234 hash, this would be stripped off before it then passes over into the next section. Or if we wanted to, we could limit the numbers that are dialed by the customer. Now this card has only got 447 in there, but if I wanted to, I could do 4478. Then this would be the only number that's allowed to pass through. We can add these on multiple lines, 4479. And this also supports regular expressions, so we could do 7. We could do it like that as well. I'm not going to bother using that for the moment. But one quick note: if you did want to add multiple routes, you have to have a dial string or a tech prefix to make sure that this is unique. Otherwise, the calls might go to the wrong route. In price limits, you can see we've got capped rate. So if the prices that you're dialing vary, you could say, I don't want the customer to be charged any more than 0.0, let's say 0.02. And then that means that no calls that are higher than this would be connected. We could also play that on the provider side. We could say that, I don't want any calls to connect on the provider that are higher than 0.001. Profit assurance. It is possible to build into the system rates that are non-profitable. There's very good reasons for doing that. But if we want to make sure that this customer is only allowed to dial on profitable calls, we can enable profit assurance. If we wanted to prevent the customer from dialing any numbers that have got connection fees, such as international premium rate numbers, we could also enable that here. So into the capacity limits, we've got the ability to restrict how many channels are available to this card. So a customer may only be allowed to dial with 20 channels. We could specify the max call duration. Now this is a very, very useful thing to set. In case any buy messages or anything go missing, you want to set this as low as possible. So if the maximum conversations are never going to be more than half an hour, you probably want to set this at 1800. We can specify the flow speed, so how many calls per second they're allowed to send. We can specify a spike buffer. This is a really, really cool feature. If your customer has got a cheap dialer that doesn't work very well and decides to send out all the calls in one go, you could specify this. The limit would be 10 calls per second. If we specify a spike buffer of, let's say, 5, what the customer could do is in 1 single second send 50 calls. The first 10 calls will connect. It would wait 1 second. It would then send the next 10 calls. It would wait another second, send the next 10, etc., etc. ASR Plus is a feature that we've got that basically caches the result of the numbers that are dialed. So if the number connects, it will allow it to connect again. If the number was rejected, it won't even bother passing the call to the provider. It would just say, this call is not going to connect. There's different settings in here. That's all explained in the documentation. I'm not going to go through that now. Script Forge is another really, really powerful feature. You can go in here and you can specify certain scripts that can be run. This is basically JavaScript. You can specify something such as a random CLI to be sent, or you can force the CLI in specific ways. And here you can pass in certain variables that can be passed along to that script. Locks is great for very, very quickly including or excluding particular carriers, because we may have maybe 10 upstream carriers and a particular carrier might start underperforming. If we want to, we can just click on this drop-down box and exclude that particular carrier. So some of the features that we've got, we have got the capabilities of doing transcoding. Here you can specify how many calls are allowed to be transcoded, how many channels. So we can say, I want 10 channels to be transcoded. We have a couple of options to prevent long duration calls by missing buys. Here we've got SIP pings. These will typically send out ping messages to both sides every 30 seconds. So we can click on this and we can change this. So if you've got a customer or carrier who doesn't very well support these SIP options pings, you can disable those. We've also got SIP session timers. Again, we've got the capabilities of manipulating this. We can send out SIP session timers from our switch. We can do nothing. We could suggest it. This is marking up. So if the customer suggests that they can support SIP session timers, we can add in an extra little header when it goes to the carrier and say, yes, we think we should use it. Or we can disable it and we can completely remove the timer support. This is if the carrier is sending SIP session timers and the customer might not support it, so we can remove those. A feature that is very, very unique to Connex is the ability for you to route your media through a different country. So even though your switch may be located in the UK or the US, you can click on this drop-down menu and you can see that we can actually route the calls, if you wanted to, through Singapore. We could route the media through Singapore, or we could route it through Nigeria. So this is very, very useful if a customer's reporting audio problems. Let's imagine that you're in Europe and your customers, all your media servers are set to go via UK London. Your customers start to report audio problems. A very, very quick way to check to see if there's any audio component problems on the Connex side is you can quickly switch to a different media server that's in a completely different country, completely different data centers. Very, very quick way of identifying the problem. RTP proxy mode, either strict or relaxed. Basically, if we have this set as strict, it means that there's no way that this call can connect from the customer to the carrier directly. If we have it as relaxed, what this basically means is that if we're unable to engage the call here, it will attempt to send it between the customer and the carrier directly. We also have call recording capabilities, and this is volume scale, so we can enable this for thousands of calls. Lastly, we've got strategies. This helps us to decide either which order the calls go out into a particular carrier, or we can even drop particular calls. So if we wanted to, say, drop any single calls that were going to a particular prefix, we could add it in here, and this would essentially drop those calls.